Good day. It's a pleasure to be with you. I wish I could be there in person. I have visited Korea many years ago, long before I started learning more about Korean culture by being a student of Taekwondo for many years. So there's much more I would like to know and see, and hopefully one day I'll be able to do that. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you today about what I've come to call stakeholder capitalism. I know there are a lot of issues and questions, and I hope to be with you to answer some of those personally. But I want to talk today, I want to talk now about this idea of stakeholder capitalism and how it's different from the kind of dominant story about business, the old story about business. And you know what this old story is. You're all familiar with it. The old story says that business is primarily about the money. It's primarily about making profits. And it's primarily about making profits for shareholders. It contains this idea that people are, for the most part, only concerned with their economic self-interest and their short-term economic self-interest. And if I were to tell somebody that I teach business ethics, they would have to manage not to laugh and go, oh, business ethics, that's a contradiction, isn't it? That's two words, you put them together like jumbo shrimp that don't make any sense. Business ethics. So I didn't know business had any, or must be a short course. Those are the things that are contained, in this old story. At its worst, the old story leads us to focus solely on share prices and quarterly increases in share prices. And in many companies, there are incentives to do this. But running a business today, leading a business today, is complicated. At one time, it may have been easier to focus on things like solely on earnings and share prices. But today, I think that's not helpful. And I want to talk about some good news, because what's happening all around the world, it's happening in Korea, it's happening in the US, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in Africa and South America, is business people are out inventing a new way to think about business. There's a new story, a new narrative is emerging, and it's fast becoming the new normal. Becoming a more conscious, a more responsible business are going to be what we would call the table stakes, the sort of entry ticket for 21st century successful businesses all around the world. Issues like purpose and stakeholders and ethics and values and solving societal problems will be at least as important as profits, and will be seen, I think, as connected to profitability. Now, in part, seeing this new story is part of what, in my view, has gone on in Korea after the financial crisis of the late 90s, choosing to invest in a variety of areas and choosing to take Korean culture to the world has been, I think, a great success, and is in part only there if you can think about this new narrative, if you can think about business as being involved in solving societal issues. Now, there are lots of ways to think about this. Many people have said, well, we just need corporate social responsibility, or, we need to think about impact investing, or what some people call ESG, environment, society, and governance. And there are lots of groups, conscious capitalism, responsible capitalism, connected capitalism, inclusive capitalism. There are groups like Just Capital that are trying to hold people's feet to the fire. There are lots of folks who are doing social entrepreneurship, and as I said, impact investing, etc. Lots of these movements. I was at a meeting in the waning days of the Obama administration. I guess that would have been the fall of 2016, before the election. And it was at the White House Department of Labor. And the point of the meeting was to look at all of these movements and to say, well, what's the right one? What's the right brand? And what can government do? What can government do to spur this along, to make it happen even faster? And I sat there amongst, all the people that have founded these movements. And I thought, I'm not sure this is the best question to ask. I think a better question might be, what are the 4 or 5 key ideas, really critical ideas that we need to dig deep on, that we need to really think hard about in order to reform this story about capitalism in business? And 2 colleagues and I, Kirsten Martin and Navithan Parmar, and I decided to write a book called The Power of And. Power of And, Responsible Business Without Trade-offs. Because we thought there were 4 or 5 key ideas that we really have to, whatever the brand turns out to be, it's got to deal with these 5 ideas. Business in the 21st century will be about these 5 ideas. And we thought that the way to articulate them was not to throw out the old story. After all, many successful businesses, have been made, thinking about shareholder value, but rather to think about what else is needed. And so thinking about this little 3-letter word, and, is important. So I want to talk about each of these 5 ideas and hopefully cause you to think more about them in your own business. Well, the first idea is about purpose and profits. And of course, both of those things are important. Now, we don't need to talk very much about why profits are important. In fact, if anything, we've overemphasized that in this short-term view of business as only dealing with quarterly profits. But the old story just makes a mistake about purpose. I'm a philosopher by training, and so I often see logical problems where others don't. Look, I need red blood cells to live, or to breathe, if you like. I need to breathe to live. But it doesn't follow that the purpose of my life is making red blood cells or breathing. That's what philosophers would call a category mistake. Businesses must have profits to live. This idea that comes often from the left that profits are evil is a silly idea. If you can't make money, you can't pay anyone, and you can't produce products, and you don't have a business. So profits are important, but that's not the purpose of a business. Not without a lot more things to say. Entrepreneurs don't start businesses, for the most part, to make as much money as they can. Oh, of course they want to make money. That goes without saying. But generally, the entrepreneurs, hundreds really that I know, they start a business because they're on fire about something. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were on fire about the personal computer revolution and their vision for it and what they could do. Yes, they built very successful, profitable companies. And they built it based on that sense of purpose, that passion that's there. It's purpose and profits. And to think through at least some of the consequences of this, purpose, doesn't live in the purpose statement. Many companies have statements of purpose or philosophy, etc., and those are good. They articulate the main ideas of why the company should exist and why anybody should care, and you need those things. But you also need that purpose to live in the details, to live in the systems and processes of a company. To say that people are very important is one thing. If you have a lousy human resource system, I don't think you mean people are very important very well. Or to say, look, ethics is one of the most important things we have, but then there's routine cheating on expenses or something like that. You don't mean it. So it's not just saying the words, it's also having the systems and processes be a part of that. Purpose is incredibly important. And because it's important, we need to encourage people to give feedback, to push back, to give dissent. In every culture around the world, there's a culturally appropriate way to push back. It's not always to be a rude American like we have. Other cultures have different ways of pushing back, of dissenting, of giving feedback. But those ways are there. And if purpose is important and you want to lead with purpose, you've got to build in feedback and pushback and people disagreeing. So purpose and profits is the first key idea that this new capitalism needs to be built around. A second key idea, no surprise to anyone who's ever heard me talk or read anything I've written, is about stakeholders. Every business has always and will always create and sometimes destroy, but try to create value for customers, suppliers, employees, communities, and the people with the money. It's about stakeholders and shareholders. Successful businesses figure out how to get these going in the same direction. Now, many people have said, look, the difference between Freeman's idea of stakeholder capitalism and Milton Friedman's idea of shareholder primacy is that Freeman says there's more stakeholders than shareholders. And well, that's right. I mean, that is a difference, but I don't think that's the main difference. The main difference is that yes, there are more stakeholders than shareholders, and shareholders themselves are stakeholders. They have an important stake. But the main difference is that stakeholder interests are interconnected. How you treat customers will depend, for instance, on how you treat employees. If you're in a retail business and you don't treat employees very well, they're probably not going to treat customers very well. And if, again, you're in a business and you're not a good citizen in the community, it's probably true that when those community members become customers or employees, they won't think much of you. The logic here is the value created for customers is a function of the value you create for the others. Sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes you're tempted to trade off the interest of customers with the interest of employees, and you need to resist that. What you want to do is use your imagination to figure out how to get both of them in the same direction, going in the same direction. The phrase I like, I'm kind of an amateur musician, and the phrase I like is harmonize. You want stakeholder interests to be harmonized. Why? Because in harmony, the notes are different. I don't like the idea we got to align people's interests. That means we got to all be the same. No, stakeholder interests are not the same. You don't want them to be the same, but you want them going in the same direction. Notes are different, but they sound good together. And the trick in running a great business is to get stakeholder interests to go in the same direction so that they sound good together. The other way to think about stakeholders, so there's more than shareholders, they're interdependent, is that we have to think about stakeholders in relationship terms, not transactional terms. What do I mean? Well, when you're in a relationship, there's a presumption that that relationship's going to continue. Many companies have adopted the language of partnership with their suppliers. There's a presumption that it's not just this contract, that it's gonna lead to more. So we can invest in this relationship. We can invest, and we have some notion of caring for each other and having each other's back, as we say, or being sure that there's some ongoing commitment here. In a transaction, there's only a commitment as long as the transaction is there. In relationships, there's a presumption that it's going to continue. Think about personal relationships for a minute. With a child or a partner or a friend, there's an assumption that this is going to continue through time. And there may come a time where the relationship gets broken and you have to end it. But usually those are painful times. And we do that as a last resort. Usually with relationships also, you don't keep score all the time. You don't keep score every day. I've been married. I'll just use a personal story. I've been married to my wife for 45 years. And if I were to go down the hall, she works here at UVA as well. If I were to go down the hall and say to her, babe, I think you owe me 3. I think you're up 3. You're ahead in the score by 3 in our 45-year relationship. I'm pretty sure I know the response that she would have. It wouldn't be very good. She is a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and it would not be very good for me. I think if that were the case. Why? You don't keep score all the time. It's give and take. It's a mutual benefit thing, and we need to see stakeholders in that same way. Now, the only way to do that, the absolutely only way to do it, is continuous engagement. We have to be continually engaged with our stakeholders, and it has to be two-way. We have to figure out ways to listen and find out what they really need from us, what they really think about us. Sometimes we have to get more comfortable with conflict, and we have to constantly think about how we create value for stakeholders. What's important in this is really creative imagination. I can't emphasize this enough. It's a skill that we don't teach very much in business, but it's a skill that we get by, again, being involved in the creative arts, music, art, theater, fiction, all kinds of ways that we use the creative part of our minds. A story told to me by the CEO of a chemical company a long time ago. They were trying to clean up the chemical company. They were routinely seen as the dirtiest company on earth, and the CEO was trying to, implement something like zero pollution or carbon neutrality. I forget exactly what it was. And it was going to take a generation. And in fact, in this case, they've done a lot over a generation. And they had a business-like plan. We're going to be here by this date, here by this date, here by this date. And the CEO goes to tell all the people at the facilities around the world, big company, that they needed to get with this program. He goes to one facility as he tells the story, and the engineers come to him and say, we can't do it. We can't meet this first interim target because this process is too dirty. Plant and equipment we have is too old. We can't do it. CEO says, okay, you want me to make the trade-off? I will. Environment, community is where I would put it. Community on the one hand versus employees on the other. Community wins, let's shut the plant. So we got to shut the plant because we're serious about this. So the engineers go away and they come back a few weeks later and they say, a miracle has occurred. We figured out how to do this. And the CEO, as he told the story, said, what's it going to cost? He's thinking millions of dollars, The engineer said, well, we're sorry to tell you, actually, if we do it this new way, we're gonna save money. Now, what's going on here? What's going on is that when trade-offs become unacceptable, we use the only real infinite resource we have, what's up here, our creative imagination, to figure out a way for a win-win solution. Or a win-win-win solution. Or as one of my friends calls it, there are 5 stakeholders, so you need win-win-win-win-wins for the 5 basic stakeholders, and you may need more. So whatever the final form of this new story of capitalism is, it's got to be about purpose and profits. It's got to be about stakeholders and shareholders. And the third thing it has to be about, we've got to see business as embedded in society and in markets. Business is replete. It's that the language of markets is everywhere, and it's important. The language of markets is important. We need to understand, competitive advantage and those kinds of things. But societal issues are important as well. The issues facing our society in the US and in Korea are substantial. And we simply can't solve these issues without business. We can't solve, just to pick one, we can't solve global warming without the incredible creativity that's happening in business. I was reading just a day or so ago about people have figured out a new leaf that captures 100 times more carbon than a regular leaf. I have absolutely nothing about this, but it's the kind of thing that it seems to me business can take and figure out how to help with the carbon issue. And we need more of that. We need people working on clean energy. We need people working on lower cost energy. We need people working on all kinds of things, some of which won't work, but many of which will, if we're going to build a world that's savable for our children. Business isn't just about the money. It's about making a commitment to a better society. Now, you don't have to take on everything, but you do have to take on, I think, some of those issues that can affect you and figure out how you're going to contribute to them. So it's purpose and profits. It's stakeholders and shareholders. It's thinking about societal issues as well as market issues. A fourth idea, I shouldn't have to say this, but unfortunately I do, is we need to see people as complexly human as well as economic. Of course, we're economic creatures. Of course, that's part of who we are, but we're more than just one-dimensional maximizers of our short-term self-interest. Look, anyone who's ever been in love, who's ever had a child, knows that we're capable of incredible acts of kindness. And of course, we know we're capable of incredible acts of selfishness and violence. All we have to do is look at our history for that. All we have to do is look around the world and see where some things have broken down and violence occurs. But we're capable of being not only self-regarding, but other-regarding. Yes, there are people who all they do is worry about their short-term economic self-interest. And we call them sociopaths. And, we try to avoid them whenever we can. Business is about the complicated human beings. It's about, yes, people that are self-interested, but it's about people who love and care, are capable of great acts of kindness. And we have to embrace our complexity rather than try and simplify it always to economic interest. There's a great theorist by the name of Harry Levinson. He used to hang out at the Harvard Business School in Boston here in the US. And Levinson was a psychoanalyst, and he sort of enjoyed being what we would call a curmudgeon. I don't know if there's a word in Korean for that or not, but someone who's kind of old like me and who doesn't pay much attention to the nice way to say things. And so Levinson would ask people, he'd go, what's the main way people think about motivation in companies? And most people would say, well, it's about rewards and punishments. It's about carrots and sticks. And so Levinson would draw a picture. And at the end here on this side is a carrot, and on this side is a stick. And there's a big question mark in the middle. And he would say, what animal do you think about that's between a carrot and a stick? And most people would say donkey, jackass. And Levinson coined an idea, which I love, called the great jackass fallacy. And what he said was, maybe people are more complicated than jackasses. He said, and it's a little worse than that. If you treat people like jackasses who only care about rewards and punishments, carrots and sticks, they start acting like it. They start trying to get the carrot and avoid the stick. We need to treat people in our companies as complexly human. Yes, they're economics. Yes, we need to reward them, and we need to acknowledge them and care about them and treat them with dignity and respect. And as leaders, we need to free them to use their creative imagination, because that's the way we're going to really create value. So 4 ideas: purpose and profits, stakeholders and shareholders, business as societal as well as subject to market forces, and seeing people as complexly human as well as economic. And finally, we go back to this issue of putting business and ethics together. This idea that business people aren't ethical. Look, of course, business people make mistakes. Of course, there's scandals. But for every scandal, for every Enron, scandal, there are 10,000 businesses out just with people trying to do the right thing. Most people, most of the time, tell the truth, keep their promises, and act responsibly. And we need to expect that from them. And we need to expect that from our businesses and not make allowances when that doesn't happen. But separating business from ethics is a mistake. Business is one of the most noble institutions that we've ever invented. It's the best way, the best institution about social cooperation. It's how we cooperate together to create value that no one of us could create alone. And we need to see integrating ethics and business together. That requires a conversation about business and ethics. It requires being tolerant of people who want to push back. And it requires a commitment to listening to each other and caring for each other. So this new story of business, which I'm going to call stakeholder capitalism, has 5 key ideas. It has to deal with purpose and profits, stakeholders and shareholders, business as a societal institution, as well as a market institution, seeing people as fully complex and human as well as economic, and putting business and ethics together. If we do those things, we can escape this idea of the short term, the focus only on short-term profits. Now, I want to caution you about one thing here. I've heard for many years, okay, Ed, this stakeholder idea makes sense, but it makes sense in the long term. You know, it doesn't make sense in the short term, or ethics makes sense in the long term, not in the short term. Now, think about this for a minute. Here's the short term. Here's the long term. If it makes sense in the long term, as the short term gets nearer, when does it start making sense in the short term? Well, the long term moves as well. So I've become skeptical, maybe it's just because I'm old, but I've become skeptical of the short term, long term distinction. I think the problem is not short-term profits. I think the problem the problem is doing the right thing in the short term, of acting for the stakeholders in the short term, not making trade-offs that are going to ultimately destroy value. And that's the hard thing. This is easy to say. It's easy for me to say, but it's hard to do. It's hard to use your creative imagination, especially if you're not used to it. I often tell people, if they want to build their creative imagination, remember those music lessons you took as a child. Start again. Doing something creative 15 minutes a day literally will change your brain. Now, one of the questions many people want to ask, and I hope we can talk about this when we have a chance to have some Q&A. One of the questions people ask is, well, if I run my business this way, can I make money? What they usually mean is that a guarantee? Is it a guarantee that I'm going to make money if I run my business this way? And my advice about guarantees is, I think they come with refrigerators, but I don't think they come with businesses. You know, were you guaranteed to make money if you try to run your business only along shareholder terms? I think the Great Recession, the global financial crisis, should have gotten your attention to no. There are no guarantees here. A better question, and again, that's kind of what philosophers like to do. I think a better question is, not am I guaranteed to make money, but is it possible? Is there a proof of possibility that if I run my business along stakeholder capitalist ways, which we know in our hearts is the right way to do it, is it possible that I'm going to make money? And the answer to that is absolutely. That's been done. the proof of possibility has been done in study after study after study. No guarantees, but certainly there are lots of cases that show that if you run your business along stakeholder-oriented terms, you're liable to do much better. So even if all you care about is money and profits, this is a better way, it seems to me. Finally, I want to end with one of the people ask me all the time, sort of, so what? What's your takeaway? Well, I've got at least one that I'll share with you. And it's a rule that I like to call the Ben, Emma, and Molly rule. So Ben, Emma, and Molly, the names of my kids. And at the end of the day, can I go home and say to Ben, Emma, and Molly, let me tell you what I did today. Let me tell you what I did today that I want you to learn from. Because if we're not trying to make our organizations places for our children to live in, I think we've got the bar too low. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today. I hope I've stimulated you to think a little more about this news story of business that I've been calling stakeholder capitalism and the role that you and your business have in it. Thank you very much.